Ladies and gentlemen, this is Scary Bad Reviews, and this is my intro. So, it is October 10th, it's 10/10/2018. As I told you guys yesterday, I continued my nice little trend of shark movies, and I went back and rewatched an old classic that I love to watch every time it comes on. I have almost worn the DVD out of it, and I love the chance to rewatch it and finally talk about it in this kind of a setting. The absolute classic Jaws. There's a lot of different things that I want to talk about with this movie, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up front with the review, try to, display my thoughts about the movie itself and critiquing it, and then I want to talk about a lot of the after effects of a lot of different aspects of this movie, because in my mind it's one of the most important movies of all time. It's one of the most important movies in cinema history. So with the review of the movie, I gave Jaws a 9 out of 10 because it does almost everything in it absolutely beautifully. I mean, it's a very streamlined plot. There's not a whole lot of excess on the movie. There's not a whole lot of fat that would need to be trimmed off. There's great performances throughout. Every character feels whole. Every character interacts with each other in a way that they need to build the tension throughout the movie, as well as display the characteristics of their own character and the personality traits of their own character. The movie is, of course, beautifully written. It's beautifully shot. The movie kind of tricks you sometimes, because in a lot of the shots of the beach, you just get this vibe of positivity throughout most of the shots that are in the town, and then all of a sudden you'll just get shots of absolute frenzy, panic, craziness when things happen, when the sharks attack and stuff like that. This movie implements a very easy, very good monster in Bruce the Shark, and if you want to look that up, the shark's name is Bruce. It's a very simple idea of these creatures that are already super dangerous that people are afraid of, and simply making it bigger, meaner, and more deadly. I think the setting of the boat for the back third of the movie is a very good setting, and it definitely adds to some of the tensions that he really plays at. The music in this movie, of course, adds layer on top of layer to it, and it keeps you on the edge of your seat. It's a great conclusion to it. The shark himself, Bruce, looks good. As simple of an animatronic as it was, and for the time being, nowadays we'd use CG for a shark that we want to make look even bigger, and this animatron looks better than most of the CG sharks that we get in modern movies. So that's It's quite amazing that it's held up over the years. I mean, I've even watched a 4K restoration of Jaws, and Bruce still looks good on the screen, even though you can tell, oh, okay, this is a robot, but he still looks menacing, and you still get scared anytime that he comes up on the boat or attacks somebody in the water. So there's definitely a lot of positive things about this movie. I gave this movie a 9 out of 10. Like I said, I don't like giving 10 out of 10 because I don't think any movie is exactly perfect. And there's not very much wrong with this movie. The only thing that I kind of knock this movie on is that sometimes it does feel a little bit goofy, and sometimes you can get that 70s vibe off of it, but that's very, very minuscule. I don't want that to be an adamant part of my review. This movie is absolutely incredible and is one of the most important movies that people need to watch of all time if they want to, consider themselves well-versed in cinema. I want to kind of dive into a lot of the outside aspects that this movie created for both Hollywood and just society in general. The first thing that I want to talk about is the aspect of that this is kind of a debate, so I'm going to go ahead and give a hot take warning for this for some people. In my personal opinion, when it comes to movies that, especially horror movies that are intended to scare you, a movie isn't efficiently scary unless it affects your life outside of the movie. So to me, movies are not considered scary unless it causes you to change what you do after you've seen the movie to accommodate what's inside of the movie. So Jaws is the first example that comes to mind. It's a prime example. Because of these shark attacks, people were afraid to go to beaches. They were afraid to go out in the water. They were afraid to go swimming. We now have an association with a certain music, a certain song that causes fear in people, whether in the water, out of the water, in the movies, out of the movies, whatever you want to say. And I think there's other examples of this as well. I think Nightmare on Elm Street is another great example of this, where the original is one of the scariest movies of all time, not because of anything that happens inside of the movie directly, but because of the fact that it caused people to be afraid to fall asleep. It honestly caused people to not be able to go to sleep for nights and nights and nights after seeing it, because they were afraid of what would happen to them if they did. So I think that movies' effects on our lives outside of the theater is one of the most important aspects and what determines if a movie is truly scary. And so I think Jaws is one of the best examples of that, in that, you know, seeing this giant shark attacking people and attacking the boat and all this stuff really made people afraid when they went to the beach. Some people were even afraid to go to the beach, and then other people were afraid when they got to the beach to go in the water because of what happened in this movie. Now, I get that there's some forms of people who will argue against that and saying, oh, they're just movies, how could they impact your outside life if you have the ability to determine reality from fiction, how are you going to have the actions inside of a movie dictate the actions outside of your life? And I completely understand that. I mean, there's a lot of people who really can separate this fiction from reality, and it may not affect them as much, but these movies that are truly scary can definitely affect people's lives outside of the theater. Once they turn their TV off, whatever way they're watching it, it definitely affects them, and I think that's what determines a truly scary movie. Another aspect of this movie, I think, is definitely the music of it. The combination of this movie coming out in 77 and then Halloween coming out in 78 are two perfect examples of music that helps the movie along and help make the movie. I've said before that Halloween is one of my favorite horror movie franchises, and I think that the original is an absolute masterpiece and an iconic piece of cinema. But both of these movies have a distinct song that people remember in connection with the movie. And not only in connection with the movie, these songs are now connected with high-tension moments that happen to us outside the theater. We connect the Jaws music to any time we see water, anytime we're in a pool, in the ocean, in a river, anything. You have kids who will jokingly start doing the Jaws music and act like there's a shark underneath the water. Same thing with Halloween. People started doing the Halloween music to be like, ooh, someone's creepy, someone's stalking you, something's gonna happen. People do the same thing with the Twilight Zone music from the original Twilight Zone series. Whenever something very odd happens that people can't explain, people will start hitting you with the do-do-do-do-do-do-do, like the little Twilight Zone melody that used to be throughout the episode. So I think that this was one of the movies that definitely brought along how music can definitely build a horror movie to be successful. And the last big outside influence that I want to talk about this movie with is that a lot of people don't know that Jaws was the birth of the idea of a summer blockbuster. So before Jaws came out, if you had a movie that was highly anticipated, high budget, you had, posters all over the place, you did radio ads, you did television ads, everything that you possibly could, those movies would come out in December near Christmas because that was times that families could go and see movies. And that was just how things were. If you had a blockbuster, if you had a movie that they spent a lot of money and a lot of time on, they released it later on in the year. And this movie came out at the beginning of the summer. I mean, this movie came out at a time where not a lot of movies would, because Hollywood thought, okay, it's hot outside, the kids will go to the beach, the kids will go to the pool, families will go do outdoor things while it's hot outside, and in the winter is when they need to find things that they can do indoors, so that's when we're going to put our big blockbuster movies in, because the families are going to need to find something inside. But Spielberg and his production crew said the best, in my mind, they must have thought that the best way that this movie would resonate and scare people is if they released it during the season that it takes place and the season it would be most relevant. I don't think a movie about a shark attacking people at a certain beach would have been as relevant and scary if it released in the middle of winter, because no one's immediately going to go to a beach anytime soon in December. So this movie releasing in the summer definitely had a direct effect on, people going to the beach right afterwards. And now we have a ton of summer blockbusters. I mean, now look at Marvel. Marvel always releases one in May. They release an Avengers themed movie usually in May and another Marvel movie over the summer. I mean, you have major movies that are super high budget, that are some of the highest grossing movies of all time that come out during the summer now. Because people displayed, when Jaws came out, people displayed the fact that, yes, it's summer and people do things outdoors, but they'll still go to the movies. I mean, they'll still go see whatever you put out, no matter what time of year it is. And so this movie was the first one that really brought that idea of, hey, we could have multiple different seasons for major releases of movies. So, all in all, I think that Jaws has many implications and many impacts and influences on the entirety of Hollywood and not just horror movies in general. I think it definitely had multiple effects that are apparent. You have the birth of the summer blockbuster. You have the idea of what actually scares people. You have the idea of tying music into scaring people and tying music into things in society outside of the theater. So I think that this movie, even outside of reviewing it, you have to look at the cultural aspects of this movie when you watch it, because it's so important. There's so many different things that happen with this movie outside of when you leave the theater and when you turn off the TV. So watching it for that importance is a great reason to watch it and to be able to understand it. On top of that, like I said, it's a great movie. It's a 9 out of 10. It's an awesome watch. Anybody who loves monster movies, anybody who loves just movies in general should watch it. There's definitely a lot of portions of it that any cinemaphile would love. So I definitely recommend it to every single person who listens to me, and I would recommend it to every single person I know who watches movies, which is pretty much everybody in the world. So solid 9 out of 10 for the iconic cinema masterpiece Jaws. So tomorrow, for the 11th, I'm going to be continuing this nice little shark theme and going with the more recent shark movie, Deep Blue Sea. Some people may know this from different performances in it, so I'm definitely going to have some fun in watching that. Stay tuned. If you guys have any recommendations for me for the rest of the month, please let me know. And thanks for listening.